One thing is certain. If you stick to the word, you will come back with a testimony. What God wants to give.
Is going to happen with Israel, in Israel, that will trigger the prophetic even more intensely than we've seen. But I'm gonna wait till those dear people all go take their seats. And now you, Bishop, why don't you take that mic for a minute? Why do you want me to talk about this, as you just said to me?
Excuse me, Dan?
You said you were hoping I would address it. Why?
Because I always glean from your knowledge because of your heritage there. And I always leave understanding things better. So I think you have the ability to put the pieces of puzzle in place, make us see the clear picture of what's going on around the world.
Well, thank you. But I also want to say to all the pastors watching, I think it's time you do a little research on the history of Israel, because you won't fully understand it if you don't understand 1948, 1967, or 73, because these were the three major wars that brought us to this place in the world. So the first one is in 48, Israel was restored. The prophetic intensified massively. Then 67, Jerusalem was restored. It then intensified even more intensely. But in 1973, something happened that people are not paying attention, is still happening. And that is when President Sadat, with Hafiz al-Assad, presidents of Egypt and Syria, secretly decided to deceive King Hussein. And that's the part people don't know, how it all fits in the picture, the prophetic picture. Because Hussein, King Hussein of Jordan, was secretly talking to Israel, and everyone knew it. No one wanted to say it publicly. He was basically a secret friend to Israel because of what happened with his grandfather. His grandfather, Abdullah, met with Golda Meir secretly before 1948. Yeah, and that is what connected the two nations. And one of these days, that connection will become more public when Jordan protects Israel from Antichrist.
The last time you spoke, you made me aware that Jews were preaching the gospel to Jews.
Yeah,
shared with me how they were having praise services right on the Temple Mount.
Yeah, and
I didn't know any of that.
That's the fulfillment of Matthew 10:23. So, but I want to say the important thing for preachers is they need to go back. Can we close that doors in the back? Because people moving and talking is extremely distracting right now. We're trying to focus on what God wants us to do here on the platform, please. So let's just close those doors back there. But what the preachers of the US and the West and the world need to be aware of is they can't present a picture of the future if they don't have a picture of the past. Because we learn from the past. Yeah. Because it repeats itself. So now we are seeing what Sadat started with Israel, when he made peace, by the way, after that war. What Jordan continued is now still continuing with the Persian Gulf nations and parts of North Africa, and now soon the Saudis and Indonesia. So a lot of peace now is in the making, and the reason the Middle East now is going to intensify aggressively towards complete peace is because of what's happening in Europe.
It kind of all fits.
It kind of all fits. We have to understand that their mentality is changing, including Israel, about the West. The Israeli news 3 days ago said, we are learning again now, we have to depend upon ourselves, not the West. Because they saw how America responded in Afghanistan, in the Ukraine. So it's all talk. When it comes down to it, a nation is on its own. So the Ukraine today is on its own fighting. It says, okay, we better learn from that. We have to depend on ourselves. We can't depend on other nations for our security. See that? The Arab world now is again learning and finding out how quickly they have to move. Is their unity now about the Palestinians, about the Israelis, is crucial. So the king of Bahrain a few days ago said, he said, our only destiny now is peace. Total peace with Israel, including Palestinian-Israeli peace. But that fulfills Ezekiel 38, totally. If you read verse 11 and 13, it says that the invasion will happen during peace. Unwalled villages, meaning no checkpoints, no walls between Palestinians and Israelis. So when people think about the Ukraine situation, they think Ukraine. I think Israel. Because you have to see the bigger picture. What does it affect?
Yeah.
So, okay, Russia and the Ukraine, fine, but it's not really prophetic. It's partially prophetic, but what is really prophetic, how does it affect the Jews? All right, let me tell you something else that just happened yesterday. Captain, a major prophecy right now is before us, and nobody talks about it. You know what it is? The exodus of Jews out of Poland and out of the Ukraine happening right now while I'm talking.
Yeah.
For the first time, the Jews of the Ukraine have said, we are going home.
Yeah.
That's a fulfillment of prophecy.
Yeah.
And now it's triggering an exodus of Jews from Poland because it's too close to what's going on. And it's going to trigger soon Europe. The Jewish people of Europe will go back to Israel. So that's prophecy. Because God says, I'm going to bring you home. He said, I will send fishers to fish you. And now this war is causing the Jewish people to say, we're not safe here. We have got to go home. And Bennett, the prime minister, day before yesterday, said to the Jews of all of Europe, come back home. He said, our doors are ready, and they've made themselves ready in Israel to receive more Jews. It's called Aliyah. Aliyah means going higher, going up, meaning going to Jerusalem. And so now the Jewish people are again on a new exodus. So this present war has created another exodus, and nobody talks about this exodus of thousands of Jews already on the march. 3,000 of them showed up in Israel yesterday. Just yesterday, 3,000.
That's why I want you to talk.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
But it's happening. Yeah. So this is prophecy before our eyes happening. So let me talk a little more about this, and I want you to pay attention to what I'm going to say. All right. So the situation with Russia. Why? Well, because Putin does not want the Ukraine to be a part of NATO. Why? Well, because in his eyes, NATO is the enemy. Think about this. When a nation in Europe becomes a part of NATO, then they are under the control of NATO militarily. So, for the Ukraine to to become a part of NATO, it means NATO will move its missiles closer to Russia. You got that? So let's just say that the Soviet Union years ago, because they don't exist no more, but let's say they brought missiles and put them on the border of Canada and the US. How would the US respond to Soviet missiles on its northern border? Or let's say the Soviet Union used Mexico to have missiles aimed at, the US. How would the US respond? They won't let it happen. You all remember when JF Kennedy stopped Khrushchev from putting Cuba, what was called the Cuban Missile Crisis, nearly caused a war because the Soviet Union under Khrushchev wanted to put missiles in Cuba, and they had a blockade. They stopped them from doing it, and it was a very tense time for the world, but then things calmed down. So Putin is saying, wait a minute, you won't let me put missiles on your border, why are you putting them on mine? So now you have Sweden, Finland, and the Ukraine that are being told by Putin, don't you dare join NATO. So it's not just one country, it's real. Because he doesn't want missiles on his borders. Now, I'm only speaking prophetically how it fits. I'm not interested in this political thing that's going on, because it's really politics and more than that. But people have got to understand how it fits prophetically. Now there's a lot of reasons I'm not giving you for why the war is happening. Well, one of them I can tell you, if the Ukraine becomes a part of the EU, Russia loses its breadbasket. So do you want to lose your breadbasket if you're a country? Okay? So that's the way he's thinking. He's saying, wait a minute, you're taking away from me my food, and my economy will diminish. Let me ask you something, Captain. If California leaves the US of A, would you like it? Why?
It's part.
But wait, but really why? Like, what's the real reason you'd be upset? It'll affect your pocketbook, that's why. 14.7% of the US economy comes from California. Almost 15%. Yeah, 15% of our economy comes from one state called California. So if California decides to leave the US of A, how would we respond? It will affect jobs, it'll affect the economy, it'll affect our food, it'll affect everything. We would all be screaming, do something about it. Well, the Ukraine is supplying Russia with way more than 14.7% of their economy when it comes to it's the breadbasket. Because Russia is too cold. As you go north, it gets cold. You can't sow and reap as quickly, huh? So when Hitler invaded Russia, what did he aim for first? The Ukraine. Why? Food, oil, food supply for his army. So people have got to understand first the political and the economical before they understand the prophetic. How can they understand the prophetic if you don't get first, let's look at the picture politically why it's happening, so at least I can be informed.